where does Kenya take the mandate to actually revitalize themselves? I would want to say, is it the right time? Yes. Is it the right way to do this? Yes. But how to do it? It has to take the will of the people to actually understand. And I don't think really the government has taken the mandate to really make the people understand that this sacrifice comes with a pain, but at a later time, it will actually pay. It will pay in the reasons of, we've seen it work for Abiy Ahmed in Ethiopia. The first time he was facing a war with the Tigrayans, and then he had an issue with Somalia, with Somaliland, trying to access the port, and all these things were going sideways. But the thing was, let me structure an economy that can be able to sustain itself. If we have a good relation with one or two neighbors, then we can access the port, bring in things cheaply, and then sustainably, we can handle all the other things ourselves. Increase manufacturing as opposed to doing a lot of importation. So, dear Kenyans, I would want to understand, has the government really gotten a point where they could make you understand what they're trying to do? Oh, that's where they need to begin from before attracting stones and pellets and fire bombs to their doorsteps. Or is it a corruption issue? Is it about the president? I don't think so. I think the Kenyan system has been so crowded that it is used to a certain tribe, it is used to a certain history of a man, it is used to a certain way of things being run. So there is someone trying to convince them that this man and his vice president, they are hustlers. They can't manage. They can manage the rest of the hustling style, but they can't manage a government. And honestly, I think these are haters of Kenya. If you are seated down and you are agreeing to this, I think you don't like Kenya. Yes, welcome to yet another episode of On The Spot, and this one is a solo version. I'm not gonna be having Innocent. Unfortunately, I don't know where he ran out to, but and of course, like we are to UKWELI Times, we are always glad and always ready to serve you to what the other outlets have not given you, an angle at which other men have not looked at in terms of world politics and affairs. We're looking at health and other events that are transpiring here in the country, in East Africa, but all over the globe. Today, I'm going to be taking you yet on another flight of interesting scenarios that you need to look at when you are making decisions, when you go to the polls next time, or even when you should use your social media. Talking about social media, you have to go and check out UKWELI Times on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, but even where you are watching right now, you just have to subscribe down there, notification bell, and even the like. My name is Bright Bashir Nionzima, and TR Bright is always what they call me. Welcome to On The Spot, the solo version with me. And it's yet another exciting episode. Yes, we are not going to look at Rwanda's politics today. We are looking at the neighbors' politics this time round. It's been an overtime, a commonplace being used in East Africa. We're talking about the Gen Z. When we talk about the Gen Z right now, you can't separate yourself from the Harambee Nation, and that is the neighborhood in Kenya. Yes, at the helm of the government right now is a man of history from the streets of selling hens, and he's known as the hustler. When he came, he was a ray of hope. Has that hope been fleeing away, or is it that the electorate haven't actually been understanding what the man's vision is all about? Has it been before? Yes. Has it been seen before in another country? Yes. Have the electorate been wrong about their president before? Yes. Have they been right about this whole thing before? Yes. All the answers are yes, but let's go step by step. When the electorate went to the polls in 2022, in 2022, we are talking about the nation of Kenya. There was definitely a merger of some political parties, which we didn't ever expect to see. I mean, looking at one-time sworn enemies coming up against one-time ally, that is another rare thing to be looking at. The president went against the vice president. Did you ever expect that? I'm talking about Uhuru Kenyatta, who was the president in the previous term, and Vice President Ruto, William Samoei, who was the vice president at the time, they went at backlogs. This time round, everybody expected Uhuru Kenyatta to leave the party and the party leadership and the country's helm with the vice president. This wasn't the case. And we saw Uhuru Kenyatta saying this himself, that if you aren't raised in the confines of State House, you do not qualify to be in the confines of State House as president of a nation. And we saw definitely one of Kenya's long-term renowned opposition leader, who is also vying for the African Union chair, like we'll be looking at later in the hour. Yes, we saw them merging to build the new Orange Democratic Alliance. Yeah, that was a shocker, wasn't it? And then we saw the hustlers coming up in yellow and green, which would be another party that is Ruto Samoei William going against the former boss and the former opposition leader with his running mate, Pastor, His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua. Well, like it was, the hustlers won, changed the political mode of Kenya, where we knew there was a certain family, you had to have a certain history to be in State House in Nairobi. This time around, it was two street hustlers going to State House because everybody thought. Did they think? Or they actually knew. Yes, they actually knew that these people would understand their political, their social, economical history, and from that they would build. Yes, these men came with a different vision of building a country that would not rely mostly on debt and debt burden, because they inherited a Kenya that was different from anybody else that had ever inherited. So definitely they had to begin with redemption of the taxation system, like Africa has been facing always. Number one, I want to give you this. Dear Kenyans, Africa for the longest time possible has been running under the pre-colonial system. From the World Bank to the African Development Bank, the equation is not coherent. We are either running through a capitalist state or a socialist state. What did Rigathi Gachagua and William Ruto Samoei want to change? Definitely, that's what the Gen Z did not agree to. Number one, they began with losing some of the battles. Kenya has been facing a couple of other issues with the neighbors. Number one, they began with the challenge with Uganda, where they had to ban the importation of dairy products and chicken products. Let's be reminded that Uganda imports over 1 million one-day chicks every single day from Kenya. And in exchange, they wanted the eggs back. Matter of fact, the Minister of Finance, Matia Ruseja Gasaija of Uganda, one day questioned his counterpart on the Kenyan side. He's like, okay, if you don't want us to bring our eggs there, then it is you rejecting your own chicken. Because we take the chicks from you, we bring back the eggs. So who is going to buy the eggs from whose chicken? And it was another blowback. Now, that is number one. Number two, when the dairy products hit their market, definitely on the Ugandan market, they have a lot of milk. And their cost of production, very low. Why? Because they have land, they have original cows. They are still one of the countries in the region that use less animal treatment. So definitely the matter of milk in the Kenyan market, Ugandan milk was cheaper than Brookside from the Kenya Highlands, definitely. There was Lato milk, which is definitely a powder milk from Uganda, which was also cheaper than any other product on the Kenyan market. So people, particularly in the West Rift, preferred to buy Ugandan milk. When Ugandan milk was just off the market, prices shot. And guess what? In Nakuru, places went blazing. That is number one. Number two. Number three, sugarcane. Now, let's be reminded that Kenya's most land cannot hold or sustain sugarcane. So the basis for their sugar plantations is actually minimal, minimized to a few regions in the rift. And they mostly relied on importing from Uganda's outgrowers. With the stopping of sugarcane to come from Uganda, what did you expect? Definitely sugar prices were going to shoot up in the air. The local mwananchi in Kenya wasn't ready to listen to whatsoever they were doing. and that was another blowback. In Uganda, on this side, they were like, okay, you stop our sugar, you stop our sugarcane, you stop our milk, you stop our eggs. Why do we pay commission money to bring petrol? That is interesting, right? So, the Ugandan president and his cabinet sat down and agreed that they were paying $3.5 more on every liter of fuel. And so, it was variating on every fuel pump station in Uganda. Why? Because there is a commissioner in Kenya that has to be paid to bring forth petrol from the port to the Kampala city. That was interesting, right? So, this with the discovery of the oil in the Albertine region, Uganda has been moving fast forward to rebuild what we would call the infrastructure that can sustain their petroleum, their carbon hydropetrol system. Every infrastructure they have built, the most of it all at the peak was the revitalizing of the Uganda National Oil Company. Now, this was initially, the Uganda National Oil Company was initially in Uganda until the blow of Idi Amin in the early 1980s, where Uganda actually would fraternize with the rest of her neighbors and would say, you know what, even if all of you went to war, I can make sure that I have fuel for my people to run on for the next 3 years. That was Idi Amin Dada, because he had national oil reservoirs in Jinja, in Mbale. All this infrastructure had been there. But along the way, because of the turmoils and everything in Uganda, they had to be abandoned. But then, now with the discovery of oil in the Albertine region, some of these things had to come back. And they came at a time when Uganda was facing a commission-based issue in importation while accessing petroleum products. Uganda, the Uganda National Oil Company, agreed with the cabinet that they were now going to import directly their oil. What does that mean? Taking out another Kenyan market out of the blue. Interesting, right? Yes, you can keep here or you can subscribe. Share this link to a friend who is interested in these economic issues, political issues here on the continent, in the region, with always me on the spot. That's Bright Bashir on UKWELI Times. I'll take a short commercial break, and when I return, we continue with what has been happening in Kenya. How did it begin, and what could solve it? Welcome back to UKWELI Times. My name is Bright Bashir here on the spot, the solo version where we're discussing analyzing issues that have brought the Gen Zs onto the streets of Kenya. We saw a few cabinet members being blasted out of office. Talking about cabinet members, we'll be talking about the Rwanda new cabinet later on. You can't miss this because it's been an interesting week here on the continent, but also in the US, where I'll be taking you later on. Yes, but we go back to the Uganda National Oil Company. The Uganda National Oil Company definitely was revitalized under the Constitution of Uganda as a mandated company, corporation as of the Constitution of Uganda, to hold all mandate concerning energy and licensing in terms of importation, distribution, management, and selling. So when the cabinet said they were going to definitely buy their own fuel so that they can solve the pump variating issues, the Uganda National Oil Company went to the Kenyan counterparts and asked them if they could allow them to buy their own fuel. Guess what happened? The Kenya exports and the energy, whatever that is, their authority there, I think the Kenyan Oil Authority or Kenya Exports Authority, something like that, KEA, I think so. So they said, you know what, for you, Uganda National Oil Company, to be able to have a license to import fuel through this land, you have to have 4 things. Number 1, you have to have a license, which is what definitely they had come to seek for. Number 2, for you to be given a license, you have to run at least 3 petrol stations in the country. Ridiculous, right? Number 3, you have to have infrastructure in the country of storage, pipeline, and all that. And number 4, you have to pay taxes. Definitely Uganda knew this. They aren't stupid. They knew all these things were coming. But the difference was, this one wasn't just another company. This was the Uganda National Oil Company. We're talking about a government asking another government if they can license them to import their own fuel. Why? Because these ones are landlocked, these ones have access to the port, so definitely these ones have to allow these ones a leeway to come to the port, isn't it? So when the Kenyan authorities refused, Uganda went to the East African Community Court. I don't think that was going to go well anyway, but the president, Samoei Ruto William, flew to Uganda and had a conversation with His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta. It was a closed-door conversation. However, we saw the results later. We later saw that there was no need for Kenya to take Uganda through all the leeways because the other licensing issues were for private sector. This was a government issue. However, they agreed that Uganda would pay rent to the Kenyan Ports Authority for storage, like it had always been anyway. And they would pay taxes for their fuel and fuel clearances like any other commodity at the port, which was okay still with Uganda National Oil Company. They went straight to Russia, they went straight to Saudi Arabia and went into contract with the manufacturers of the oil. I think the first barrels came with a Djibouti ferrying company which docked in Mombasa. So I think 3-4 weeks ago. Now, where did this leave Kenya? Kenya lost another market. Why? Because they simply wanted to inflate their prices on commission and the renting of the infrastructure. How does this all have effect? I was giving you a little bit of the Kenya-Uganda. Now, of course, if you have the Kenya-Uganda issue, you will have a Kenya-Rwanda issue, you will have a Kenya-Burundi issue, Kenya-South Sudan issue, Kenya-Congo issue. Why? Because most of these countries have their products accessed through Uganda. That is interesting, right? So, a few weeks later, we see Kenya Airways being banned to actually dock anywhere in Tanzania. You know why? Because apparently the Kenyan Aviation Authority had stopped Tanzania's air carrier, the flag carrier, sorry, to dock at the business consulate of Kenya. And so in retaliation, the Tanzanians were like, also, okay, let no plane from Kenya come here. So KQ was banned. That means there was not going to be any flights between Dar es Salaam, Kilimanjaro, to Nairobi, or wherever you can say, as long as it was KQ. That went up again. Then Kenya went ahead and wanted to propose a deal with Andani Airports Company. Andani Airports Company is an Indian, interesting, is an Indian company that manages airports. Now, the Gen Zs were not only angry at how much was being sold or even wasn't being considered for their markets and jobs. This time round, they were mad that everything that could have been affordable was shooting through the roof. All because of what? We are yet to see. Now, when William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua came into power, they had the vision of building a Kenya that was debt-free, that was not burdened by the debt and reliance of borrowing from the foreigners. And this was going well until some of the Kenyan, I think, leaders were thinking in an opposite direction, because some of the things that were bringing in taxes, that were bringing in foreign exchange, they were losing the battles. They were losing the battles. You can't lose a sugar battle. You can't lose a dairy product battle. You can't lose a chicken product battle. And then you lose your Kenya KQ battle. You are losing 100%. You're losing money. You're losing taxes. So how are you going to sustain yourself? That is very interesting to you, all right. Yeah? So the Gen Zs decided to come to the streets. We saw infrastructure being demolished at first. Then we saw Parliament building being attacked. This wasn't new. We saw this in the US. Capitol Hill was attacked. So it was something the Kenyans could do. And then this whole fiasco became a regional issue. Later on, we saw the Ugandans wanting to try it on, but of course it wasn't successful. But where does Kenya take the mandate to actually revitalize themselves? I would want to say, is it the right time? Yes. Is it the right way to do this? Yes. But how to do it? It has to take the will of the people to actually understand. And I don't think really the government has taken the mandate to really make the people understand that this sacrifice comes with a pain, but at a later time, it will actually pay. It will pay in the reasons of, we've seen it work for Abiy Ahmed in Ethiopia. The first time he was facing a war with the Tigrayans, and then he had an issue with Somalia, with Somaliland, trying to access the port, and all these things were going sideways. But the thing was, let me structure an economy that can be able to sustain itself. If we have a good relation with one or two neighbors, then we can access the port, bring in things cheaply, and then sustainably, we can handle all the other things ourselves. Increase manufacturing as opposed to doing a lot of importation. So, dear Kenyans, I would want to understand, has the government really gotten a point where they could make you understand what they're trying to do? Oh, that's where they need to begin from before attracting stones and pellets and fire bombs to their doorsteps. Or is it a corruption issue? Is it about the president? I don't think so. I think the Kenyan system has been so crowded that it is used to a certain tribe, it is used to a certain history of a man, it is used to a certain way of things being run. So there is someone trying to convince them that this man and his vice president, they are hustlers. They can't manage. They can manage the rest of the hustling style, but they can't manage a government. And honestly, I think these are haters of Kenya. If you are seated down and you are agreeing to this, I think you don't like Kenya. I think you don't like East Africa. I think you do not love your nation. And I will say this without fear of contradiction, because you need to study your history and get to understand that there have not been men in the Kenyan history that have actually been possible enough to take the hardest decisions, like firing an entire cabinet, to make sure that you people are being fed right. However, on the other side, I would also want to blame the government. I don't think the government has really taken a clear step or has taken an effort enough to actually make the electorate or make the people being served understand the vision of the new government. And this can't work like that. It has to be either you make the electorate understand what you're trying to build here and what they are going to sacrifice, if they are willing to sacrifice, so that you negotiate and you're in the middle rather than destroying the roads. Because if I should remind you, those roads, some of them are still being paid for. So if you break them, that increases your cost of sugar at home. Why? Because they have to take that extra cost of sugar onto the burden of the road, or replacing it, repairing it, and paying back the Chinese. So, which one do you take? The question is what I leave you. Share the link to every Kenyan that is in the nation. Maybe they could give us some comments in the description down there. Yeah, they can also follow us. Subscribe, like, and share your views. I would like to have a Kenyan discussing this issue with me on the next episode. It's UKWELI Times. On the Spot is the show. My name is Bright Bashir, and I would say adios.